The Remarkable People Podcast. Check it out. The Remarkable People Podcast. Listen, do, repeat. For life.
Hello, friends. I'm David Pasqualone, and welcome to this week's episode of the Remarkable People Podcast, the Zack Rutledge story. This week, Zack is a personal trainer. He's a yoga instructor. He has an advanced degree. He is an author. He has all sorts of accolades and achievements. But we're going to take this week to talk about anxiety and depression and PTSD. And we go all over the place. I even get into a couple of my personal rants. But this week is packed with what I think is great illustrations and great points and great life tips and advice, not just to get you thinking about healing and wellness and growing in the ways that we're hurting. It could be physical, it could be mental, it could be emotional. This week will be kind of a catalyst. It's like taking the foundation and really evaluating where are we at and what do we need, and then giving us those practical steps to start towards the healing and getting the assistance we need, because we're not here to do it alone. You know, as iron sharpeneth iron, so does the man the countenance of his friend. And, you know, it's not good that man should be alone. These are biblical, true concepts. All biblical concepts are true, but these are true concepts. And man means mankind, not man like male. So this episode with Zack was one that I had fun with. It was informative. It made me think. And it's also going to get us to act. And that's what's important. Like our slogan says, let's just not just listen, but to do the knowledge and to repeat it each day so we can have a great life in this world and in the next. So get ready for an amazing episode with Zack. Before this episode, a couple quick things. Number one, we love you. Glad you're here today. Number two, hope you loved the episode as much as I did. And then please share it on your social media, like it in Apple Podcasts, and tell your friends about it. Number three, at the end of this, there's a special offer from Zack. So don't be afraid to stick around and listen to the offer and get as much as you can out of this, because that's what we're here for, to help each other grow and to move forward. See you soon. Hey, Zack, how are you today, brother?
I'm doing really well. How are you?
Man, I'm doing fantastic. Like you and I were discussing before this episode, feeling a little tired, but overall life's good, man. You had a rough weekend, you said?
Physically and a little bit mentally taxing. I'm finishing up a yoga teacher training. So these are pretty long days where it's kind of drinking from a fire hose type deal. And where we're getting a lot of information. We're also practicing a lot. So, you know, I'm pretty sore, but feeling good.
Yeah, and for our listeners, you're in for a special treat. Zack's not only a yoga coach and an author and a personal trainer. There's so much more to his story that you're about to hear, like we talked about in the intro. But if you're not familiar with yoga, it's like, oh, what's yoga? A little stretching, little poses. No, it's super tough, man. And the higher you get, the harder it gets. So when you're listening to Zack, you'll understand more probably the pain he's in as we go through. Today, Zack, like our listeners know, our episodes go deep and wide, but we're going to really, focus this episode on your story. And I know it touches a lot on PTSD and depression and anxiety and self-image. So you, at this time, man, take the episode. Where did Zack come from? What was his upbringing like? What made you the journey and the facts, the man you are today? And then let's just share your story. And if we can help you at the end, we're going to transition to where you are and where you're going. And that way our community just helps each other. Sound good?
Great. Thank you.
All right, buddy. So where were you born, brother? Tell us a story.
Yeah. So I was born in New Jersey, and I had like a very stable childhood, upper middle class, middle-class childhood, a very, loving family. Everything was pretty good on, externally, right? In hindsight, there were some like chemical issues, I guess you could call it, looking back. Some things, like I took things a little harder than other people, and I kind of struggled with certain things, but for the most part, all was good. As I got a little older, noticed a few things kind of spiraling, not radically out of control, but I noticed, like I said, taking things a little harder than I should have. Things like normal teenage things, like breakups, things like that. Now, when things really got out of hand, or I guess when the catalyst of my story was actually the summer after high school, my best friend was killed. And that was kind of like the perfect storm, so to speak. So it was like, that was happening, which was obviously devastating, but it was also, this was pre-social media. Not that it really matters, but it was even harder to keep in touch. And all of my friends left, right? So my entire support system was gone. So I was really left alone going to college, not knowing anybody, 2 weeks after. And at the same time, my karate school closed. So I was really, really on my own. I had just earned a black belt in karate. And so that was it. I was on my own.
And just to put a frame, not to interrupt you, but to put a frame of reference, we have listeners from all over the world. And if you're not American based, the traditional, and if you're watching this, quote unquote, the traditional path for Americans is, you go from 5 years old to 18 to school, then you get out, and then you either go to the workforce or you go to college. So This all happened for Zack at the same time. So all his friends scattered and went to college. His best friend passed away. His karate school closed. So really, like the majority of your infrastructure just disappeared overnight almost.
Yeah, essentially, yeah. And I call it the perfect storm, because on top of that, it seems like a lot of the time, I don't want to speak for everyone, but a lot of the time, these chemical issues that pop up in people tend to heighten during the late teens, early 20s. So things like OCD or depression or what have you kind of really manifest in those years. And that's what happened with me. So it wasn't just grief. Like grief you have to go through, right? This was something that wasn't, it didn't feel temporary. Almost like grief is almost like a temporary thing. It's something that everyone has to go through, right? And there's no way of getting around that. You can take as much, medications, as many medications as you'd like, but when you come off of them, you still have to go through the grief. This wasn't that. I was feeling the grief on top of something else. So things got really out of control. So I was literally spending days in bed, just not getting up, like literally I would get up here and there, just to move my body around, but I wasn't really sleeping, wasn't really awake. And this was happening for months at a time. I only lasted in college, a couple of months, if that. And when I started to realize about 6 months later, I was like, okay, I really need to get myself together. And I was having a real tough time focusing on anything. I was like, you know what? I've got to start with these micro goals. Okay. And I started with the worst thing possible. I started by watching the news, which is probably the worst decision you could make. But in my mind,
depressive and fake.
Right. So in my mind, I was like, okay, smart people watch the news. I'm going to get through a half hour of the news, and then I'll get through an hour of the news. But it was all just really depressing, right? So what I did after that, I was lucky enough to fall. I was playing in bands this whole time. I still play in bands, but I was playing in bands this whole time. I mean, we weren't playing very much those few months. I really didn't have that social structure, but I started playing in bands again. I was playing in high school, and about a year after out of high school, I started playing in bands again. And I was lucky enough to fall into this group of guys who were into like working out. And that was the first like concrete step, the first little tiny step up. And from there, it was just really like this brick by brick type of thing. I started pulling ideas that I developed through karate that, they were so valuable, but I didn't really realize it till I was closer to being an adult. I don't really consider people an adult till their mid-20s, but I started pulling from some of those lessons. But it was also dialing in my nutrition, which sounds silly, right, for people with depression, but there are some people who actually consider depression an inflammatory issue. And if you're taking in the wrong foods, you can literally be inflaming things in your brain. And it took me a while to learn that. And things were more subtle then. Like right now, if I have a glass of milk, it won't end well, right? But then it was like a little more subtle. So just dialing that in. Interesting side note, actually, a lot of people consider depression to be a gut issue because you actually create more serotonin in your gut than you do in your brain. So people are giving probiotics. So it was really like, I would say that, from 18 years old on, the story of my life was really just this brick by brick building myself back up. I ended up graduating from college, which I never thought I'd even go back to college. I went back to college, graduated with honors. And then I, became a personal trainer. I went back and got a master's degree. Now here we are. I'm going back for a second master's degree to become a therapist. In the meantime, also doing all these other things that I do. But an important thing to note is, this wasn't all like, this flip of a switch and all of a sudden I got I was graduating with honors. I was focused on these external things, right? So I was like, okay, well, if I graduate college, then I'll feel better. Then I'll feel whole. It didn't happen. I was like, okay, well then, I won't be like everyone else. I won't just be like this person who graduated college and has these honors. I'll also be a personal trainer. I'll get that as an extra, and then I'll be, feel whole. And that didn't help either. So I was like, okay, so what's going on? Maybe I should turn this arrow inwards. So that's what I did. And it wasn't until I was like working with clients, like actual, I was a personal trainer, but really working with the clients and seeing how they felt about things. And I became a fitness nutrition specialist. And when they were calling me, and it was that kind of like that giving back and working with people on that like very intimate level, that's what almost like kickstarted that internal work, like to really start that in myself as well. Because when people were calling me about nutrition stuff, they weren't talking about nutrition. They knew what to eat. When people were struggling with their weight, it wasn't about food. 80% of the time, it wasn't about food. Mm-hmm. So yeah, so that's like the abbreviated version. Here we are now.
Yeah, and there's so many points and depths to go to, but just your last comment, I mean, I think that's a human characteristic and flaw. Most of us in most situations know exactly what we need to do. We just don't do it. You may not be a certified personal trainer, but to get up and walk, or to get up and run and go to the gym. So it's like, why do you think it is that we know, how many books have been written in the world? Mm-hmm. You go into a bookstore and there's just like, I couldn't read these in my lifetime. And that's just only a fraction. What do you think the psychological condition of a man meaning mankind, that makes us know truth but not act on it? Is that tie into that self-destructive behavior or something deeper?
It's not a simple answer. So part of it is what I call infobesity, right? You walk into a bookstore and you see thousands of books laying around. You don't know where to start. It gets overwhelming and you stop. That's one. The other is you're so worried about putting out the next fire, or you have that focus of the external thing because that's what you can see, right? A lot of people are that way. They want that concrete thing instead of turning the arrow inwards. It's always out. So they're like, well, the fence needs to be painted, so I'm going to go paint the fence. And I'll get to this later. I'll get to the important things later. I think maybe one innate thing in all humans, I hate speaking for everyone, but in a lot of humans is it's like an interesting type of, I'm struggling for the word, procrastination, I guess. But we tend to do, and this is funny, I've noticed this with a lot of people, they have all these important things to do, right? And they'll always start with the second most important thing. And then they'll kind of like, okay, once I clear these other things out, then I'll work on this most important thing. Meanwhile, that most important thing is sitting there, but they want to work on these other things first, because then it gives them that that sense of accomplishment, right? So they think. I mean, it does to an extent, right? But they're never focusing on that main thing. It's an interesting question. And I don't know if I'm qualified to speak for all of mankind, but you definitely have a point there where we're not good at that follow through.
Yeah, and it's always intriguing because I struggle with that. Like I'll have a list of tasks, and I'm a big list guy, and then I'll find myself knocking out the small, unimportant things, and then the things that I need to do or that I promise to do, get them done. But man, it's a struggle. Like I'll wait till the last minute, not because I'm lazy, but because I'm pushing it off and find excuses. And that always bothers me because the quote by Ben Franklin rings in my head, the man who is good at making excuses is often good at nothing else. And it's like, I'll push stuff off, and I always want to know, like, where is that inside of me and why? Like, where did it come from? Why do I push off the important stuff? And I'm thinking we have listeners all over the world right now listening to this episode, like, oh yeah, that's me. So I didn't know if you had any insights on how do we overcome that? Like, what are steps we can take?
Well, my theory is we don't like that feeling, right? Of all that pressure, that's this important thing going on. We don't like that feeling. It's easier just to kick the can down the road. And it's also like, ooh, what if I get this wrong? I think that's a big thing. So if I screw up these
fear of failure.
Things,
I agree.
If I screw up these other things, it won't matter. But if I screw up this big thing, that's going to matter, right? And it's going to sound crazy. It's going to sound crazy, but hear me out on this. The way I got around this was when I went to grad school for the first time, and I had a huge paper to do. And this was like the most important thing. I remember one specific paper when this all clicked. It was the most important paper of the semester. And I knew I had to get it done. And what I did literally was I was like, I'm just going to open a document and label it and put it in its correct place. And I was like, and that's what I'm going to do. And that's what I did. And I was like, okay. And then I'm just going to put my name on it, put, the correct heading, like the date and like the subject and what the paper is, all that. And that was what I did. And then I was like, okay, I'm going to count that as a win. But then I'm going to start putting down just any kind of brainstorm ideas. And then the pressure's off. And that's all I'm going to do. And I start putting just brainstorming ideas down, right? Because that's the way I tend to write, is I tend to put all my basic ideas in, and then I fine tune it, right? So I'm just putting in my basic ideas. And I was like, okay, I'm just going to do my intro. And you see where this is going, right? So it's just these tiny, tiny goals. But once I started going, that little bit of breath came in, a little bit of pressure came off my shoulders. And then it seemed like that next tiny little goal, and all you do is you're setting up these little tiny micro goals. And that's it. And that's all you need to do. And once you start knocking those out, the pressure gets to be a little less, a little less, a little less. Next thing you know, you don't want to stop because you're feeling good. You're in that zone, right? You're in that state of flow. So it sounds silly, but that's the way to do it, is just open up a document, put your name on it. And it all just kind of falls into place. It's that first part. It's just that getting started. That's the hardest part.
Yeah. And I think for myself, for you, for all our listeners, for everybody, I think that's why people who procrastinate, not everybody's like, if you think the word procrastinate, you think, oh, if that's somebody who's lazy, they're just pushing off because they're lazy. No, it's not true. A lot of people have so many psychological reasons why they're pushing it off. But I know for myself, by pushing things off, it forces me to get it done. Like I have a goal at 8 a.m. Wednesday morning. So Tuesday night, I'm like, all right, I'll just stay up all night and get it done. It forces me into that flow, into that zone.
That's very common. And I'm like you, right? So
yeah. And should we just embrace it and accept it? Or is there a way to fix it? Because that's something that I still struggle with. I'm 44. I'm like, man, why? I think about this for a month and then I knock it out in 7 hours. Why didn't I just do this a month ago?
Yeah. Well, there is a benefit to it in some instances, right? Sometimes it's great sometimes it works to our advantage, right? But when it starts taking over our lives or affecting everything in our lives, then that's no good, right? So I think sometimes leaving that is okay. I have a great example of this. When I was back in my undergrad, I wrote a paper and I saved it on a flash drive and I emailed it to myself. I got to the school. It wasn't in my email. I was like, okay, well, at least it's on my flash drive, Check my flash drive. It wasn't there either. and it was due in after lunch. So I literally ran to the library, sat down, rewrote the entire paper. It was a 10-page paper. I remember this from the top of my head, just from what I remembered, rewrote it, cleaned up. I got like a B plus. So like, but I was laser focused because I had to be, right. And that was not a good situation. Right. But
yeah, but you got it done. Nice.
But I got it done. Right. And because I had to focus. So there is, there are times when that's okay. Like, right. Like let things go. But, obviously it's not healthy when, David, if you were like agonizing over this thing on Wednesday, right? And let's say you knew about this a week ago. I don't know when you knew about this. And you're agonizing over it. Then it may just be more advantageous to get it done, right? Instead of carrying that weight around, it'll be better just to get it done. But since you're so like, you're in tune, right? You have that insight to know, well, I'm going to be under the gun Tuesday. I'm going to knock this thing out. So maybe you're not carrying that weight around, right? So it's a balance, right?
So for people who are feeling the weight, because I agree with you, like for me, it's like I got to the point where I just accept and I'm thankful and I can get it done and have a history getting it done. But for the people listening who are carrying the weight around, what steps do you have for them to get started and throw that monkey into the river and let it drown?
Well, I've never heard that before.
It just came to me. I just picture this weighted fat monkey on my back. I just want to throw that bastard in the river and let him drown.
We're going to start something. Okay, this is going to be a new saying. We got to put it on a Urban Dictionary or something. All right. Cool. I'm stealing that. So anyway, it does depend on the person you are because everyone's a little different, right? There's that book, what's it called? Eat the Frog? Have you heard of that book? It's
no. Sounds close to killing a monkey, though.
It does sound close to killing a monkey. Yeah, Eat That Frog, I think it's called. I think it's David Allen wrote it, and it's about like getting the most important thing done first thing in the morning. So the idea is you're eating the frog, like you're getting the worst thing done that you're not looking forward to first thing in the morning, right? And then you have the rest of the day to go. And he makes it automatic. So he wakes up, brushes his teeth, gets right into it, and that's what works for him. And then he's fine, right? May work for some people. I like to pair things with like routine. So like I know I start every morning, I brush my teeth, I drink water, I eat breakfast, have coffee, and then I get to work. And I have this block of, my like important things because I know I'm more of a morning person. I work really well just after I've had my coffee, right? So I basically pair it with my coffee. Like I'll sit there with my coffee and do my more important things. So if you pair it with something too, sometimes that works for people. Otherwise, maybe it's just like I said, just say, hey, I'm going to take this in micro goals. Like I'm just going to start. See, I always use this computer analogy because it's easy, right? Because I'll just say, start the document, just put your name on it, and maybe just do that and pair that with something, or just say, I'm just going to do that at lunch. So you're not trying to swallow this entire huge goal. So it's not quite as daunting. Because a lot of times people with heightened sensitivities, they're like afraid of the fear. They're afraid of the fear that they're going to mess it up. But once they get going, they realize it's not that intense, right? So it's kind of like just getting over that fear.
And you brought up another point that's important. I've heard so many people say, start your day and do this checklist and da-da-da-da-da. And I understand the concept behind it and I agree with it for the most part. Yeah. But you also made a great point that I think if you're listening, there's so many people in the world that feel like failures because they don't get up and have the start of the day like, I'm on fire. Some people take time to warm up, and then the end of the day is their A game, or the midday is their A game. So talk about that for the people that need to learn to forgive themselves. Like there's nothing wrong with you, and you're not doing something wrong if you're not a morning person, because not everybody wakes up like that guy from Jerry Maguire, like, hey, it's going to be a great day. Some people need time to warm up. So talk to those people so they can forgive themselves and love themselves.
Absolutely. Well, you said it for me, man. I mean, absolutely. I agree with that. There are people who do their best work late at night. And I understand that because just like there are people who do their best work at 5 a.m, it's because everything is quiet. You don't have other people reaching out to you, and you have that kind of like focus bubble. A good friend of mine, she's an author, and she does her best work, I'm not kidding you, between 2 and 3 a.m. And I'm like, that's real. I'm obviously asleep. And she said it's just quiet, and she's a night person. And I get that. I mean, look at all the great chefs and a lot of great musicians. They're night people. That's just the way some people are wired. And that's okay. You know, a lot of authors, like my friend.
Yeah, I never accepted that until I was reading about Winston Churchill. He's a man like that did so much and so many people hated. And that dude would stay in bed till lunch, and you know what I mean? And everybody would be like, oh, that guy's lazy. But look how much he accomplished in life. And he'd stay up till the middle of the night. And it's just like, we're just built differently. And yeah, there's a mental edge to it too. Like working at night for some people. Yeah. It's like they feel like everybody else is sleeping, so they're sneaking behind and getting ahead. You know what I mean? Right. So basically, I think what both of us are saying is find what works for you and do it, and don't feel like you're doing something wrong.
Absolutely. It's just I mean, that only comes from this old idea of, you know, farming when the sunlight is out, right? But we don't live in that world anymore, so it's okay. You know, it's okay if you sleep till later. It doesn't matter. We're not bound to sunlight these days. So if you focus better at night, fine. Work at night. That's great.
So let's do this, Zach, if you don't mind. Let's go back to your story. And I appreciate all the insight we're given, but I want to make sure we really understand you and where you came from and what made you. So after your best friend passed away, you said you started noticing like you're not just taking things deeper and harder, and there's something a little different. It's not you're just more a sensitive guy, but there's actually something different. Yeah. Did you ever identify medically, chemically, emotionally, like what condition you have or deficiency? Or was it just, I just started working out and building those step-by-step bricks?
Hard to say, because my mind was in so many different places. Now looking back, I would assume that I was, you know, I could have been dysthymic, which is like, dysthymia is like a low-level depression. And then when traumatic events happen, you dip deeper. Another thing I should note is psychological issues. A lot of the time, there is no clear-cut box you can put things in. Sometimes it's a mix of things. It's not like doing math, right, where there's a definite answer. So I did notice for sure, and this is going to sound weird again, that I was driving one day and I was like, I don't really see colors anymore. I mean, I saw them, but like normally when you see colors, it like, you almost have like feelings that come along with it. And it was like, everything just seemed black and white. And I was like, something is just not working. I would also, because even my memory seemed more vivid than the world I was living in at that time. Like it seemed like there was just more color. And that's the best way I could put it. And it sounds weird, I know.
No, that doesn't seem weird at all. I mean, I know myself and our listeners, we all have different struggles. And I know personally, like I've struggled with depression from a catalyst like you did. Yeah. And for me, it's more sound. I can't hear right. I actually had a hearing test. And so if you're listening to Zach and I out there as a listener, you're not alone, right? But I had a hearing test. Now, I had doctors and counselors for the last 6 years tell me I had PTSD, and I've never publicly said that. So anyways, I had a traumatic life instance in 2014, 2015, and it just really rocked me. And I'm like, what? And I'm always asking my kids and stuff, and people, oh, what? Especially if I'm like in a place where there's background noise. So I finally went and got a hearing test, and the lady knew nothing about what's going on. And she looked at me and she's like, do you have PTSD? Apparently, yes, because everybody keeps telling me that. And she's like, listen, you have perfect hearing, but you have an auditory processing that I see in all these soldiers that come through. So when I hear something, my brain's not processing it. So it's getting better, but they just told me it's going to take time. So when you say you didn't see colors, I absolutely believe it, because it's how God made our minds and our bodies. The mind can only take so much if we don't process it right. So then that overload occurs, and I lost hearing, you lost sight, or, you know, colors. So yeah, I totally get it. But how did you get it back? So how did you get it back?
Well, we got to touch back on this. That is absolutely fascinating. And that's really fascinating. So I'm actually going to I'll jump back to your question, but I just want to, this is interesting.
Hey man, welcome to the Remarkable People podcast. Our listeners know we jump back and forth. We go through
I'm jumping all over the place.
Yeah,
right
man.
now. Okay, so this grad program I'm starting in the spring is it's a therapist program, a traditional psychotherapist program. However, on top of it, it's called dance/movement therapy. I'm not doing the dance, but I'm doing the movement stuff. Okay. Nobody wants to see that. So I'm doing the movement stuff. And it's this really like cool cutting edge thing where your body keeps score. And that's one really interesting instance with the hearing. That's really interesting. So, your body does keep score, it shows these certain things, right? Now, in one of my psychology courses, we learned about I'm not going to get graphic. A woman was in a car accident and saw something awful, and I'm not going to get graphic about it, but she went blind. It's like legit blind. They were, doing the tests and she wouldn't flinch, that kind of thing. After she worked out her emotional issues, her vision came back. So very interesting. And I forgot about that till you mentioned that about the hearing. That's just really fascinating and really worth people knowing that they may be noticing things in their bodies that maybe they're not so in tune. They're so used to walking around numb, right? And they're not totally in tune with how they're feeling, but they're noticing things like the color or the hearing. That's great. I'm so glad you brought that up. So anyway, back to your question about building my, what was the question? It was about building myself.
Just basically we got listeners now, like 90% like, what the heck are they talking about? But then there's 10% like, holy crap, them too? That's what I have. So for that 10% of our listeners all over the globe, what can they do to start seeing the colors and feeling the sun and hearing again properly and not being like, what?
Yeah. No, thank you. No, it was purely internal work. And it took me a lot longer than somebody with help because I kind of went alone on this. However, I went a lot deeper than anyone I know. I did every single thing under the sun. And it took me years and years and years and years and it wasn't an instant thing. It wasn't like all of a sudden I felt the colors again, right? It was just these gradual steps, which is honestly, that's why I wrote the book, was because I don't want for something like that to take someone 10 years. I want to speed up this whole process. Actually, one really nice compliment I got was from a psychologist who had read the book, and she was like, "This book is really good, just not for people who are suffering through this kind of stuff, but really just for anyone. This is really good, just way to improve people's lives." I was like, "Oh, thank you so much." That was really nice of her. So humble brag there, but
yeah, man, no, that's important because every human has the same needs. We all want to be loved. We all want to feel special. We all want to, feel like we have a purpose. And we all have different weaknesses and strengths. But I'm sure if you have truth is truth, man. It's going to benefit everybody. Some people might just add a little buff and shine, and some people might restore a broken foundation. So keep going, man.
And we've all been through trauma. If you're a human, you've been through some kind of trauma, whether it's big T or little t, or you're pressing it, you've been through something. And like you said about that buff and shine thing, that's one thing that I can't get behind with a lot of social media stuff. I mean, you are the exception because you're open about things. Most people you see on social media, and I'll say that, most people you see are just showing the highlights and they're not showing the struggle, right? You're not seeing, I equate it to an iceberg, right? You only see the tips of the iceberg, but you don't see all that stuff underneath, all the work it took to get there, or all the things they've gone through. So, I mean, that just speaks to you. And I just really appreciate, you being open about things. So letting people see under the hood, so to speak, and letting people see the work. And the humanness of it, it's crazy. We're going around with all these filters and showing ourselves in these perfect destinations, doing these perfect things. That's not human.
Yeah, I thank you. But for all our listeners, we're all on a journey, man. And I remember when I was a kid, and I think I'm a little bit older than you. I'm 44. You don't have to say your age, but
Hmm.
when I was a kid, there was a bunch of magazines because we didn't have social media, right? So people would buy these teen bop magazines. Women would buy these like Vogue and Self and, all these girl magazines. And at that point, there really wasn't men's magazines. Like there wasn't Men's Health. I think there might have been GQ.
Wow.
So it was like they did statistics and studies that if a woman looked at these women magazines, they'd be I forget the statistic, but it was like for every minute they looked, they were depressed for 15 because they're just flipping through, seeing perfect, airbrushed, and they felt bad about themselves. And they see these rich people on vacation, and rich meaning wealth in the sense of financial. So someone's a house mom and they can't travel, and now they're feeling bad about themselves, not looking at all the stuff they have. So whether it was 1970, 1980, or 2021, anytime we're comparing, it's unhealthy and it brings us down. So what you're saying, man, is spot on. And for our listeners, no good can come of it, And like, I think a big part of men have deteriorated. We're becoming feminine. Women are becoming masculine. And that's not a sexual thing in that. I'm talking about the emotional strength. Like, before we had cowboys and men who were strong and would bear the burden of the family for love, not because a man's better than a woman or a woman's better than a man, because it was, their role, so to speak. Yeah. And then we start getting to the social media. Now we're degrading and we're breaking down and comparing. And I just think it's just a downward slope that society's taken us on, and it's so unhealthy.
It's hard because it's almost like we're still figuring out how this is going to work, right? It's not that old, all this social media stuff. And we have so much information, right? And in some ways, it's the best of times and worst of times, right? In some ways, we have all these really great messages. And then in some ways, we have these really awful messages coming through. So it's like, it's almost like now our main focus is like, or our main, what should be our main objective is like filtering out, right? Is like just figuring out like making sense of all this. Cause like I said before, it's infobesity. There's just so much going on, and it'll be interesting to see how this plays out, but it's getting wild, right?
Yeah. And I love that term, information obesity. I remember I wrote an article years ago called Techno-whelmed, because there's just so much out there, just technology-wise and choices, but information obesity is great. But you how many for us as a community, right? Everybody listening to this, you listen to experts say you need to do this per day, 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 and you start listening to different experts say all the things you need to do per day, and you got 82 hours in a 24-hour period, right?
Yes.
It's impossible. Yes. It's impossible.
Yes, it's impossible.
So you have to do what God's made you to do and follow, like Zach saying, the journey. So let's go back. So you never got like clinically or formally diagnosed with what you had, but you're in a band and they start. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I should add to that. I did do like one day of therapy, and the lady wasn't really a good fit. And it put a bad taste in my mouth for therapy. I was like, okay, well then this isn't for me. And that was really the end of it. It wasn't until I was in college, I was taking a couple of psychology courses, and I was like, hey, you have a private practice on the side. I really like you. Can I come to you? And he was like, yeah, sure. So I went to him for a while, and he was really great. That was a really eye-opening thing. So, a lot of people not everyone, but a lot of people, they feel like therapy is just for broken people. That's totally not the case. Especially now that I'm learning more about it, it's really not the case. It's really just a coach. It's an emotional coach. That's a really good way of looking at it. And,
yeah, that's a great statement you just made. If therapy is just for broken people and the gym's just for fat people.
Oh, great. Oh, great analogy. Yes, thank you. Thank you.
Because if you think you go to the gym, you get people of all sorts. Same thing with therapy. We're all just trying to get emotionally stronger and physically stronger. It's the same parallel.
And there's no like perfect, like, okay, I've made it. There's no like perfect goal, right? We're constantly evolving and changing, and that's great. That's part of the human experience. Oh, I'm so glad you said that. Yeah, man, this is a great podcast.
Well, hopefully people listen. Well, hopefully people listen and it helps them. It's helping me. Hopefully it helps you. Hopefully it helps our listeners, because we love them, and that's what we're here for. So, and something you said too is, please, if you've tried counseling or therapy or any kind of, you know, you've reached for help and it's gone bad, sadly, that's common. I mean,
it's very common.
And
it's very common.
Yeah. So don't give up though, because let's say you have 10 doctors or counselors or psychologists or psychiatrists. Probably 2 are awful, 5 or 6 don't care, but you got the 2 gems that do. They care.
Absolutely.
Keep searching for them. And do you have any tips, Zach, for helping people find the 2 good ones? Because, you know, I heard this years ago and I bust out laughing. I grabbed a doctor and threw him against a wall because I was wicked sick, and it was physical. It wasn't mental. And this dude didn't even look me in the eye and told me I needed antidepressants. And I was about to die. I dropped down to 145 pounds. And I basically said to him, I said, listen, if I tell you the elephant's purple, it's purple. If it's blue, it's blue. And I swear, if you write a prescription for an antidepressant, I'm going to shove that pen up your beep. And I was furious because I was dying. It ended up, it was an infection in my face from a dentist. Oh. It was systematically just killing me over time. Lost my gallbladder, had a bunch of issues. So it was physical. Oh. And this dude's telling me it's mental. Now everything goes hand in hand. I was getting depressed by being sick.
Yeah.
But anyways, long story short, that guy's a complete loser. Right. And now, thank the Lord, he's out of practice. But one of my friends, he's out of practice. And one of my friends said to me when I was telling the story about this jerk, he's like, Dave, what do you call a doctor that graduates first in his class? And I'm like, doctor? And he's like, Dave, what do you call a doctor that graduates last in his class? I'm like, doctor.
Yeah.
So you got 10 physicians that graduate or 10 counselors that graduate, but it doesn't mean they're quality. So keep searching for the quality, but don't kill somebody, because I was this close. I'm like, if I'm going to die, this is one of my last actions. I'm going to take you out so you can't hurt anybody else. And his intern was laughing her ass off. She was like, she must have seen this jerk like doing this to other people. And she literally was sitting there laughing. My wife was in shock. He pissed his pants almost, and the intern was laughing. So
that's a great story.
Yeah. Sadly, I got too many of those. But go back. So what's the advice you give for our listeners trying to find a quality, caring solution?
Well, first off, if you're able, have a team. And this doesn't mean like having a team of therapists, but have a team of like, so everyone does stuff outside of work, right? There's something going on that they do. So whether you're in martial arts or you do yoga or something, whatever it is, even just like a reading group or whatever, you know, you can't rely on just one person to like solve all your problems. And that's kind of like not really what they're there for. They're there to help you along, but nobody can do it for you, right? So, but it's good to have, I always think the more people, the better, right? Even if you start like just like a little Zoom support group, right? Great. That's part of your team, right? When it comes to therapists, it's hard because I understand it's expensive. I get it. And you don't want to be bouncing from place to place to place. What I would do is start conversations in these circles that you have, maybe outside of work, because there is unfortunately still that stigma, right? So if you're in work and you're asking for therapists, you know, unfortunately there's a stigma around it. But you know, outside of work, people are. Yeah.
I'm laughing like, do you know somebody that deals with voices? No, I'm just kidding. That would be bad at work. I'm not making fun of anybody that has that issue, but that would be bad to bring up at work.
You got to have fun with it. So that's actually a great point, right? We can't be taking everything too seriously in life because, you know, that's not going to help anyone. So anyway.
Yeah. And, you know, seriously, stick on that for a second. That's oh man, like, you know, people call it, and they're being offensive, but when they call us a snowflake generation, but the thing is, like, listen, people are way too sensitive. If you can't, you can call me an ugly fat Italian. I'm fine with it because I don't care. Like, I mean, you might be right and it sends me to the gym. You might be wrong. And I'm like, that guy's a jerk, but freaking be honest. Why everybody's so damn touchy, and you get these morons in politics leading and hiding and suppressing everything. It's just a big mess. So listen, if you're fat, call yourself fat. If you're skinny, call yourself skinny. But work on it. And like, if you want to call me some bad name, go ahead. It's okay. It's probably true, but don't be so damn sensitive.
Yeah. And, and I get it if it's, I get certain circumstances. I get it.
Yeah. Like when if somebody called me, like I was Italian and we grew up in Boston. So, okay, there's all different cultures. There's one race, the human race, but there's different nations, there's different cultures, and there's derogatory terms for everybody. So I used to hate being called certain things, but I was like, you know what? He guy's an idiot. I'm going to move on. Now, I'm not saying we should be insensitive or harsh, but we shouldn't have to worry about, did I say the wrong word?
No, I'm with you there.
The cancel culture, it's ridiculous.
No, I am totally with you there. But that starts with ourselves, right? We can't take ourselves too seriously. So I think if everybody just kind of takes ownership of, look, I'm just, that part of being positive, having that positive mindset, which is so important, is having a sense of humor about yourself, and not taking not everything is so tense and like a matter of life and death. Like it's okay to laugh. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like I remember, I don't know if you remember this. I mean, I was still a kid, but after 9/11, Saturday Night Live wasn't on air for a while. And Lorne Michaels started the show, and somebody asked him, is it okay to laugh? And he, yeah, it's okay. It's okay to laugh now, as that's part of life. Right. So it's just an important note. We don't want to take things too seriously and take things too hard. And I bring that up because that a lot of times that's really hard for people with depression, is almost like they take everything so seriously that it sucks the joy out of things, and if you can just give yourself these little bit of breaks, it's like giving yourself a break, giving these other people breaks, it's just going to make for a happier situation. Right.
Oh yeah, 100%. So I didn't mean to derail you on that question.
Oh, no.
How do you find the good ones in the pool of unqualified or bad ones?
Okay, yeah.
Go back to that. No. That's my bad, man. I keep
there seems to be a theme in our conversation. We keep yeah. So anyway,
we keep coming back though. That's all that matters. It's
good,
not how you start. It's how you finish, right?
Man. Good on you, dude. Yeah. So I'll tell you the way I did it was, like I said, it was through my professor. But now I'm lucky enough to where, in my yoga school, I actually work with a lot of therapists, which is crazy. And they're really good at pointing me in the right direction. Of course, I wouldn't want to work with any of them because I know them pretty well, but they're pretty good at pointing me in the right direction. And it's relatively easy now to Google search specifics. So if it was a traumatic event, or a great example is a grief counselor, right? I'm good friends with a grief counselor. So she may be a good place to start. And believe it or not, the vast majority of therapists are totally cool, and they will get, if your personalities just don't jive, and they will give you a list of other therapists. That's part of their job, because when you're going to a therapist, it's an intimate relationship. It sounds weird, but that's what it is, right? And you can't have an intimate relationship with anybody on the street. So yeah, so just get into one is really my advice. Just get into one.
And then if it doesn't fit, just keep looking till you find the right fit.
They will give you a list of other people, and they won't be offended. Yeah.
Yeah, and a good one won't be offended. And then
good one won't be offended.
Yeah, and then what Zach says about the team approach, man, what's more complex, you or a house? Right. What's more important, you or a house? What's more valuable, you or a house? Okay. Why are you trying to build yourself without any help, or with one specialist? When you have a house, you got 36 experts. You got plumbers, you got electricians, you got network people, you got paint people, you got gutter people. If a house, which is nothing, takes all those experts, then don't be afraid to look for experts to fill in our gaps. Don't try to do it all yourself.
I love that.
So, yeah, I mean, it's just true though. I mean, it's like when people look at the human body and how amazing it is, how you just get a cut and your body's like whoosh and it heals, and how God made us so beautiful. We're, wonderfully and remarkably made. And it's just crazy. We all understand so little, but
It
yet
is. I say this a lot in my training because we talk about all kinds of, body things, because that's what we do. It's endlessly fascinating. You start researching, you'll never stop. It's endlessly fascinating.
100%. And that's why when you're talking about this, but go back to the gut too, because I personally, I don't know. So help me out, help our listeners out. I believe the gut does have a big impact. And just last night, I was having this discussion. One of my friends was with me and I felt bad. I mentioned that to you, and I think I mentioned it earlier in the podcast. Just this weekend, I just haven't felt myself, and my gut was upset. And they're like 70% of health comes from the gut. They were from that train. I don't understand, but I do believe 100% there's a connection, because when my stomach hurts, I can't think straight. And I can feel like the difference in my body. What are your thoughts on the gut, and how do we heal it?
So I don't try to get too complicated on this. There is no perfect diet. I have a killer recipe in my book, by the way, for a shake that I think will be easy on anybody's stomach. I love that shake. It's delicious.
Nice. Well, is it something that's in the book? Can we share it, or just put it as part of the book?
Yeah, it's in the book, but we can share it.
Okay, cool. We'll put that in the show notes and link to it.
Yeah, no, it's great. But everyone digests things a little differently, so that's almost a given at this point. I think we all understand that. I go pretty in my private practice. I go pretty basic. I really like the Mediterranean and the anti-inflammatory diets. They're great, but even within those, there are certain things that my body doesn't take well. And I will tell you this: my fiance, she was having a lot of stomach issues, and they did it's not just for allergies, but it's for intolerances also. They're slightly different. Allergy is when your immune system kicks in. Intolerance is just your body just like rejects it. So my fiance is awesome, but her back, it wasn't pretty, but it was necessary. They put 82 pricks in her back, 82 of them, with different to test her like allergies and intolerances. Turns out she's allergic to hay, horses, stuff that may not really matter too much in her daily life, but found out she's really allergic to certain kinds of wheat. And that was a huge eye opener. And I believe most primary care doctors can do this test if you ask them. I know mine does. So that, start simple and just try to get some of these tests and see what your body can take. Like you said, it's all one system, and it affects your mood for sure.
Yeah. And what Zach's saying, you made two really strong points. I want to talk about the actually having an allergic reaction and an intolerance is different.
Okay.
And it's hard for a doctor to even know sometimes, because there's things I'm allergic to I have zero problem with. There's things that I don't show up on the test, but man, it's an issue. And so the difference between that is major. But then also for your fiance, soon to be wife, we have listeners all over the world. And in America, you have gluten-free and you have all these wheat things. Yeah. And it's a big deal. But people overseas don't understand, because their wheat is genetically different. I don't know if you knew that. I don't know if our listeners know that.
The food is different depending on where you are.
Yeah. So look at the region of the world you're in too, because when I remember my daughter and I, when we went over to Italy a couple of years ago, ate everything all day, all night, all the breads, zero issues. And I lost 12 pounds.
Sounds glorious.
Because dude, it was fantastic. But what I'm saying is, now there was a lack of stress because, we were on vacation, but at the same time, it was a lot. Like, I know when I eat, sometimes I feel like I'm 5 months pregnant. Like, it swells up my gut. Like, I'm already chubby, man. I haven't worked out in 3 years, but like, the thing is, it's like, sometimes I eat and I just feel terrible, but over there I could eat and eat and eat and eat and no issues. So if you're in Italy, you're like, what are these guys talking about? Or France, right? But in America, it's a huge issue. So
Yeah.
that's interesting. Now, what did they tell her to do? Did they just tell her avoid it, or what was the outcome?
Certain things she has to avoid, and believe it or not, she takes like a daily like allergy medicine that's safe to take every day because she has a cat and she's allergic to cats, and she feels a lot better. Yeah, she feels like way better. Like it does the trick. So yeah.
All right, man. Well, we're covering a lot of good stuff here. So you started working out. That was the beginning of your journey. Let's go back to there. You talked about brick by brick and steps. What were the steps that healed Zack? Or, like you said, it's a constant forever, but what were the real big steps that our guests can think about doing? Working out, I agree. Boom. That's right there.
Yep. Dialed in the nutrition. So, I talk about that plenty in the book. One of them, believe it or not, was supplements. And I do have, the disclaimer in there. You should always contact your primary care doctor, because you don't want to be taking something that is going to interact with something else that you're taking. But, and I don't put a whole lot of supplements in there, but I put the 4 heavy hitters in there. But my favorite is turmeric. I don't know if you know about turmeric. So
you know what? I had a buddy who owned a supplement store that gave me some, but I never took it, and I keep hearing about it. What is it and what's it for? He told me it's for I was doing jujitsu and my knees would hurt, so he gave me it for that. What is it for?
Yeah. So, well, it's an anti-inflammatory. It's really good for brain health, and it's basically like an orange root, and it's very popular in cooking in like South Asia, that kind of thing, right? In India, they cook a lot with it. However, the supplement's better because you take 1 capsule. That's like eating 1,000 turmeric roots, because what you're getting out of it, sometimes you'll see it is labeled as curcumin or curcuminoids. So it's all the same thing, right? Now, the important thing with it is take it with black pepper. Now, about half of the supplements out there will be black pepper in the capsules. If it's not in there, put a little black pepper on your food and take it with your food, because that black pepper is going to increase the bioavailability of the turmeric. Without the black pepper, it's just going to pass through your system. 90-something% of it passes through your system. You need that black pepper in order to break it down and to absorb it. But turmeric, fantastic.
That is crazy you said that, because just a month ago or so, I literally was at dinner and I'm like, okay, salt is known. Salt has savor. Salt, it talks about in the Bible how, salt and preserving, and when it's no good, you cast it on the ground so it kills the weeds. Salt always has a purpose. But I remember looking at pepper and I asked people, I'm like, other than the flavor of pepper, what good is it? And nobody knew. Yeah. And then I asked the doctor I knew, and they're like, I don't know. I'm like, I don't know. And I just forgot about it till right now. But there's no way, like, even though they didn't have the technology, internet, our ancestors had wisdom, and some of it came directly from God. He's like, use this. And they don't even know why. But you just said that. So basically, black pepper acts as a carrying agent to unlock and accelerate or enhance other different supplements. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yes, absolutely. But turmeric,
you just solved the problem. I mean, you just solved the question in my mind, man. Thank you.
Yeah. I mean, pretty much anything exists for a reason, right?
Yeah.
So that's the big one with turmeric. And like I said, a lot of the time you'll see it already packaged in there. Like the real good supplement companies who know what's up, they'll package it just automatically in there. You'll see like 1% is black pepper. Yeah. So I do talk about supplements. I talk about mindset in there. I talk about getting people's mind right. I talk about it. It's a tough one for people, but I do talk about meditation, and I go through some of my favorite meditations in there. I talk about, like, almost like I was saying before about the positive media. Like, I sat down and started watching the news, and that was probably the worst thing I could have done, because I was just seeing all these awful stories. I talk about, sorting out your surroundings and only getting the good media in, right? Turning to those positive podcasts and feeding your brain all these good things, uplifting yourselves, as opposed to listening to, I'm not knocking anybody, but I know certain people who are just way into like those serial killer podcasts, which is like, man, to me, that just seems really negative. It would affect me differently. I don't know what they're getting out of it, but it would affect me differently. I'm not a fan.
Yeah.
Uh,
Everybody's different because that, do you know that that's the number one murder mystery
I'm not
is,
surprised.
I mean, like podcasting, it's exponentially off the chart.
Man, that's crazy. That's real crazy. I mean, good for them if that's what's serving some people in some way. For me, I don't want to be listening about murders all the time. So, feeding yourself that positive influence is a big thing. I even talk about medication in there, in my experiences with it. I didn't start taking medication until way, way, way late in the game. And I'm glad I did, because I filled out like everything else. And that was just kind of like the cherry on top. That was like when I was missing that 10, 15%, that I knew I'd done everything else under the sun. And that was going to, take care of just those certain things that flared up. But yeah, I talk about I talk about relationships in the book. There's a lot of things. What I do in the book is I take the D-Day approach, because I believe that there's not like a silver bullet when it comes to solving depression. There's no one answer. A lot of people will say, oh, this is your one thing. Do this one thing and you'll be good. It's a complex issue. And for a complex issue, you got to come at it from every angle. They'll all improve your life in a different way. Even if you're, let's just say 3 out of the however many I have in there really help with your depression, they'll still help support your life in a different way. But yeah, it's the D-Day approach. I firmly believe in that. Yeah.
Yeah. And define D-Day approach.
Coming at it with everything. Yeah. That's kind of now that I think about it, that's kind of a violent way to put it, but
no, man, it's not violence. Life. D-Day, it works. We got it. We got the results. But
yeah,
no.
yeah.
And one thing I like about your book, Zach, is it's not a 482 page book.
Oh, thank you for saying that.
Mention
Thank
that.
you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mentioned that in the opening of the book. Yeah, the last thing I wanted to do was sit down and read a 350 page book or whatever to get a few ideas out of it. I made it as tight and concise as possible, something that somebody could actually read in a sitting. And it was made really almost as a gift, because a lot of times people aren't going to reach out for help. But if you give this something small like this to someone, it's not going to be intimidating, like getting through that big project, the thing that we procrastinate with. It's that small thing that we can get through and read through. It's a repeat read. I really want people to almost study this. This was years and years in the making, and I've spoken with plenty of psychologists who really support it. And I've been so, lucky to have that support and almost like validation, it feels like. But yeah, it's almost more like a gift. Yeah.
Yeah. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I saw the e-version. I think the e-version was 27 pages. Is that correct? Of
I think
content?
it's a little longer than that, but not by much. By much.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. And again, I was looking at the e-version, so I might have got the numbers wrong based on that. But if you're listening, you're like, I'm not a reader. Well, be a life achiever, be a studier, be someone who's searching for truth. And one thing I really liked about your book, Zach, is when I was looking through it, I didn't get a chance to read it because we had a disconnect. It was my fault.
It was my fault. It was my fault. I sent it to we can tell him I sent it to the wrong David. All right,
oh, no, it's
honest.
okay. But it's my fault. It's my fault in the sense that I should have just read it anyways. I'm dyslexic, so I like to read hard copies. And then Zach was kind enough to send me a hard copy, and there's just a blip there.
I sent it to the wrong guy.
But anyways, no, it's okay. It's okay, dude. I could have read it. I could have sucked it up, put on my big boy pants, could have read the digital copy. But I looked through it, and I loved what I saw. And I loved the fact that sometimes you get a book and it's, 50 pages, but it's filled with like 27 pages of pictures. Yours is content, but it's well written, and it's like organized, and it's very intelligent, but it's not hard to read. So if you're listening, man, pick up Zach's book. We'll put a link in the show notes where you can just purchase it, physical or digital, and check it out. It's going to help you. It's going to give you tools. It's going to give you the ability to think it and look at things from a different perspective. Probably just like this podcast. I think we've had a couple killer illustrations that we both came up with spontaneous, but I think it's helping me, and it'll help you, and it'll help everyone. So make sure you check this out. And then, where are you today, Zach? Like, first off, between birth and where you are today, is there anything significant in your life we've missed thus far that you want to cover, or you're like, no, hey, this is important. We need to talk about this. I want to help people, and this will help them. Is there anything like that we skipped in your life?
I mean, there's plenty of ego things, but I'm not really at that stage anymore, to be honest. Like, I just want people to get their eyes on this book and share it with as many people as they can. That's where I'm at right now. And it's really going to be focusing on becoming a therapist next, and doing the movement stuff, of course, on top of it. Just trying to, do the good work.
All right. And I agree with you that everybody's depressed, let's say, or has anxiety for a reason, and that's complex.
Yeah.
But I do think there's pillars like exercise. Like, yeah, exercise isn't the only solution, but man, it's a huge piece. And then you talk about you're going to movement therapy. Well, working out is movement, and going for walks is movement, and it just circulates. It's like lubricating the body and cleaning out those cells. So what are other big pillars? Like, hey, you're listening to this podcast, you have no money, but you need help to do these three things: workout, blank, blank. What are those things to get started in healing?
Started. Yeah, no, I get what you're saying. I mean, the moving your body is, so important. We've covered that. The getting your diet right. See, I always like to start with the physical because you can see it. So I just start with the physical. It's like the easiest because it's like you can move things, right? So
it's visual.
Like,
yeah.
It's visual, and it's not so much that cerebral thing. So yeah, so the working out, the diet, get that nailed down, especially if there's stuff that you're not isn't agreeing with you. But of course, what kind of fuel do you want to burn? It's not just for your physical health. I mean, and your brain is part of your body, so you got to be giving it that great fuel, right? That's almost like a no-brainer. And this is just a little tip that I'll say this is important too. You have to practice forgiveness, not just for yourself. I almost count that as a given at this point, but a lot of times when people are depressed, they blame others for not understanding or saying the wrong things. But here's the thing: they can't understand because they're not in your shoes. Everyone's situation is different. You know what I mean? And people are going to give you bad advice, and they may have the best intentions, but it may not work for you. So you have to forgive them. You can't think that everyone's against you, which is a very easy thing for people to fall into when they have depression.
Yeah, I think that's excellent advice, because we get stuck in our own head, in our own world, and realizing that they can't understand you because they're not you. I think that's really important. That's a pretty profound statement. You guys rewind the last minute and re-listen to what Zack said there, because that's really important. All right, well, let's start with this too, because you brought up eating and we talked about working out. Most people know they need to eat right and work out. Now, some people may not understand what eating right is, and they need to do some work and research. But let's say for the majority of us who know, okay, I need to work out and I need to eat right.
Yeah, right.
Why don't we? Why do we go through the drive-through of that restaurant, make our stomachs fat and our wallet skinny? Why do we abuse our bodies so we feel like trash? Why do we do that? What's the self-sabotage, and how do we free ourselves from that?
Part of it's ease. Let's be honest. It's just easy to drive through and get something. If you're doing that, go for the least bad of the options. Let's say you have to go to one of the fast food chains, get the grilled chicken sandwich. Don't get the fries, get the salad, and then, get the least bad option. I get that. Another thing is people, they're so used to feeling bad, like that low level physically bad, they don't even know it. And what they do to get their little spikes of like feel good, like the chemicals rushing to their brain, is they'll actually do some of the worst things. They'll eat like a sleeve of Oreos. And I know somebody who would do that, and it would feel great for 5 minutes. And then you get that crash and back to their normal, so to speak, right? Which is awful, right? So what I do when I'm talking to my nutrition clients, let's just say it's just way too daunting. I will say, start with your drinks. This is a very practical thing, but a lot of my book is just very practical. They start with what you're drinking. A lot of times people are drinking like that. There's way more soda than you would imagine. People drink a lot of soda. There's also like that nasty like sweetened iced tea, like a real sweet iced tea. It's basically soda.
Okay. I'm gonna laugh because Zach is from New Jersey and I'm from Boston, outside of Boston, Milford, Mass. And he's like that really sweet tea. Okay, so once you hit like North Carolina down, it's just sweet tea. And I live down here now in the South, so it's sweet tea is everywhere and it's
Right.
hyper saturated. So if you're not from America, or if you're not from especially the South, and you don't know what the hell is sweet tea,
Yeah.
sweet tea is tea heated and it hyper saturates and it really just packs it each cell with sugar. It's like Coca-Cola. Like you physically couldn't put all that sugar in those cells unless you hyper saturate. You heat it incredibly and you basically cram that sugar in and addict people. You know, one of the worst drugs in the world is sugar, and we're all like pounding it down with no remorse. So, but go on. But sweet tea is what you were referring to.
There is something very charming about sweet tea, but I will say this: we shouldn't be drinking it every day, right?
It's a lot of diabetes down here.
It's so sad. So start with that, right? Because that seems a little more manageable than trying to do everything all at once. So start with your drinks. And if you don't like plain water, which a lot of people don't, fine. You've heard the other things, like just cut up the fruit, throw it in there, squeeze some lemon in there. Or the tea, maybe don't make sweet tea. Maybe start with 1 sugar packet, and then cut it down to half a sugar packet. And then and then eventually you'll find, this, you're from Boston, unsweetened iced tea is great. It's fantastic.
Yeah, it's like chocolate too. If you've ever ate chocolate,
good
like
point.
regular chocolate, and then you start eating real dark chocolate, like 92% cacao. At first, it tastes like trash, the real stuff, and you're like, "That's gross." But seriously, take a little bite, let it settle. Take a little bite, let it settle, and then it doesn't take even weeks. It takes a little bit of time, and then you're like, "Wow, this is really good." And then you go back to the trash you've ate for 30 years, and you're like, this is disgusting. You can actually taste the chemicals. So listen to Zach. It's a process. And I'm going to add this in, and people might hate me, but don't go for the diet crap. That's
agreed.
You're taking out sugar, which is bad for you, and adding a toxic waste chemical that's going to make you sicker. And some of the fattest overweight people I know, like I'm overweight in fat, but I'm talking like gross, like not you're gross, but grossly overweight, like 350, 400 pounds. People are drinking Diet Cokes, breakfast, lunch, and dinner. That stuff's addictive. It's causing more problems. It's enhancing diabetes.
Absolutely.
It's giving you cancers down the road. Get that crap out of your diet. If you're going to die, at least do it naturally. Don't do it with freaking chemicals, man.
I 100% agree. Yeah, just terrible, right? So that's why we want to start with drinks. Start by drinking like you're doing right now, drinking just water. Yeah, it's great. And what'll happen is you're like you said before, about the chocolate, your taste buds actually do change. So I couldn't even drink a sweet tea right now. It's just so sweet to me. Your taste buds do change. They physically change. It's not a mental thing. They physically change. So start with the drinks. That's what I would say. Start there. It's a nice small goal. And then from there, start with, breakfast. And then, say, hey, for lunch and dinner, I'm going to eat like garbage. And then I'm just going to eat a healthy breakfast and just make the small changes. And eventually, you will never go back. You will never go back to eating all that crap.
And I agree 100% unless it's mental. That's the last thing I want to touch on. You physically, you'll see, and you're growing mentally and emotionally, and you're getting healthy. You won't ever want to go back. You'll see the changes. You'll feel the changes. But then as humans, sometimes we have that self-destruct button, or we have something happens and then we hate ourselves.
Yeah.
Derail, right?
Yeah.
People quit smoking for 20 years. They start smoking again. 227 chemicals per stick, proven to be cancerous, proven to be addictive, but they pick it back up. When that happens, and I know you don't have your final degree yet, but what you saw in your own life that's worked, when you get off the tracks, how do you put it back on the tracks?
It's that, I feel like I'm beating a dead horse here, but it's that D-Day. It's that little bit of everything, right? Let's just say you fall off and you smoke a cigarette for the first time in 20 years, right? It's reaching out to your support system. it's sharpening that sword, so to speak. It's getting in your workout. It's doing all these things that we mentioned and getting right back on track, right? And it's not beating yourself up. It's not like, oh, you're terrible for doing this. It's just, no, it's getting back to that positive mindset. Do everything you can. Smoking is a tough one, man. I get it. I mean, I've never smoked, but I get it. And this is where the self-forgiveness, I talked about forgiving other people, but the self-forgiveness, this is a funny thing. When people beat themselves up for smoking a cigarette, they feel so bad, they reach out for another cigarette. So yeah, forgive yourself and then get back on track. Drink that water and get back on track.
Yeah, man. All right, Zach. Well, it's been a pleasure. Now, we've talked about your past. Anything we missed, I want you to go in and backfill, talk about it. Let's address it. And if not, where's Zach today and where are you going so we can help you get there for sure? And you've helped us so much. How can we as listeners help you?
Thank you so much. Really, I mean, my next step is finishing up this therapy degree. I'm just really excited on that. And to help me, just help other people, picking up this book and giving it out. I firmly believe in it. It's the best thing I could have possibly done. Keeping it brief and coming at it from every angle. So yeah, picking up the book and sharing with people you think need it.
Awesome, man. Now, is there anything, I know we talked about a special offer and putting the protein, putting the shake in, but is there a special offer or anything that you had for our audience?
Yeah, sure. If anybody wants, they can shoot me an email directly. It's just zacksrutledge@gmail.com, and I'll send them a chapter.
Oh, nice, man.
So they can see if it's their cup of tea.
Beautiful. So I'll put a link in the show notes to Zach. We'll put a link in the show notes to the books. You can just order it, pick it up, help Zach, support him. If you get a few bucks, and then it's worth it. Like I said, it's small and concise. It's non-intimidating. And again, I have not fully read it yet, but I went through the digital copy and I was loving what I was seeing. And then also we got a picture of Zach on there. So we got that going on. If you want to see what Zach looks like, if you're not watching the video version. But that's it, man. Anything else we can do to help you, Zach, or help you achieve what God's called you to do?
No, luckily I'm feeling pretty good right now. So yeah, I'm feeling good. So if there's anything I can do to help you on your mission, just let me know.
No, man. I mean, share the podcast. Like we tell our listeners, our motto slogan is listen, do, repeat for life. So don't just listen to this podcast episode, but do it. Yeah. Repeat it every day so you can have a great life in this world and an eternity to come. So that's our whole focus. So if you're listening now as Zach, or if you're listening now as one of our wonderful, remarkable community members around the world, just share it. Just say, hey, heard this episode, loved it. Put it in your social media, send it to a friend you think might need it. Connect with Zach for coaching. If you could be anywhere in the world and you guys can jump on a Zoom call and just let's try to help each other grow and please God and glorify him. So I appreciate you, my brother. And I thank you for being here today. It's been truly wonderful.
I appreciate you, man. Everything you do. This is great. Thank you so much again. It's really an honor. Yeah.
Oh, dude, my honor as well. Thank you. So for our listeners out there, we love you. Reach out to Zach. Reach out to me if you need anything. And like we just said, don't just listen, but do it, repeat it, and have a great life. We love you. I'm David Pasqualone. This is Mr. Zack Rutledge, and we love you, and we'll catch you next week. Ciao. Bye, Zach.
Thank you. Bye.
The Remarkable People Podcast. Check it out. The Remarkable People Podcast. Listen, do, repeat for life.